Welcome to my apiary. A couple of my stops yesterday had to do with the shop, so I picked up some stuff to hopefully make the shop a little nicer as far as storage goes and production as well. So I'll show you those things here. I did go to Lee Valley, but I did not buy drawer slides at Lee Valley. I went to my local Princess Auto store and I picked up some PowerFist drawer slides. I've used them before. I was using them on those 28-inch trays that I put together, and they seemed to be good. They were a full. These are actually on sale, so they were full $10 cheaper than what Lee Valley was selling for a 20-inch slide. There's a 21-inch deep opening, so I put a 20-inch slide in there. So I got 8 because this cabinet, I want to divide these 2 sections into 2, so I'll have 4 sections, and then I want to put a drawer at the bottom that will perhaps take one of my 53-liter totes, and then a drawer at the top that's not as deep. So that's 4 compartments with 2 drawers each. That's 8. So I had to buy 8 slides, and I was glad to see they were on sale. Save some money because they're expensive. Even on sale, that was that $14 a piece. Even on sale, they were 23, 24 at Lee Valley, but they weren't on sale. So also, I got my rip blade back, nicely sharpened. It's got the wax on it still, which I'll leave that wax on until I use it. So that's really great. And yeah, my recollection was right. That was $20, just under $20. It's 19 something to sharpen that blade. So that's really nice because that's about I don't know, that maybe is a $60 blade. Most of my blades are between $60 and $80 new. So this was the big purchase here. This is a Craig track and stop system. So what I want to do with this is when I build my fence on my radial arm saw, this is a track that sits on top of the fence. So if you think of this box as the fence that I'm pushing my material up against, and the saw is going to run through, then this track mounts to the top of the fence. It has a integrated measuring tape on there that I will calibrate right up to my blade, and then it has 2 movable stop systems on there with a hair guide for the measuring tape. It'll be a lot like the table saw in that way. So I can dial that right in. No more measuring against my blade. I should be able to move my stop out, set the hair guide on the measure, and then cut my pieces. It's got two styles of stops, so you can see kind of here the picture of how it's set up. So these move along and then they tighten down, so you can put your material right against that stop and then cut. This is they call it a production stop. It's a fixed stop. You set that there and it stays there. This one they call a flip stop. So what happens is, if you're cutting maybe 2 size of pieces in production, you can set this one for the long one, and you can set this one for the short one, and then this one you can either just lift it to flip it up out of the way, or you can press your stock in this direction, and because it's curved, it just lifts up like that. So it's handy for often you'll have a piece. Maybe you'll have, a lot of times when I do reclaimed lumber or lumber that you don't know, maybe it isn't quite square or whatever. If I want to cut it, say 20 inches, and it's 22 inches or, whatever, 30 inches, I can take that piece, slide it under here, square the end, and then pull it out and then push it against the stop and cut it to length without actually ever touching the stop. This is primarily made for a miter saw, a lot like my sliding compound miter saw that I have. but I'm going to try and use it on my radial arm saw because this is a kind of a fixed machine in my shop. The sliding compound miter saw is on a mobile stand, which is not as nice to work on when you're doing production work. So anyway, that'll be installed here at some point. But I need to get the other table from my buddy, decide which table I'm using, either this one or the other one, and then I can put all that together. I thought I had a big idea and could use these doors, since I'm going with drawers on that cabinet. You can do drawers and doors, but it's mostly aesthetic. It partly helps keep the dust out of the drawers. So I don't need the 4 doors that came off. And I thought, oh, I'll just use a door to make a divider, because I need to make dividers for these 2 sections. I thought, well, I'll just use the door. I'll put the door in there. Now the problem is they've thwarted that plan because they made this kind of a handle on top. And the space I need to fill is about that high. And so I end up with a compromised edge on the top. So I can't do that. So I think what's going to happen with these doors is they're going to become either drawer bottoms or cut them up for drawer sides, something like that. So I'll definitely repurpose these for things like that, which, with the price of lumber, you need to use it efficiently. And I don't have a pile of plywood that's appropriate for doing this kind of thing. I've got a little bit of that oak left, which probably will be used for the dividers. I'll have to measure it up, see if it's tall enough. For these drawers, the first step really is to cut dividers for the centers so that I can create 4 sections in this cabinet. This is the oak that I was using for the trays. It's the oak that kind of is a bit nasty on the end and whatnot, so I can still use it. Structurally, it's fine. And 23.5 is what I need for height on that. And so height here, we're looking at over 28.5, so we've got lots of height. Where we're short is the width. They're 21 inches deep. I need 42 for both. I'm 37 and just over 37. But I can cut that 37 in half and just leave a little gap at the back. The divider doesn't have to go clear to the back. Nice if it did, but beggars can't be choosers. So I'm just going to cut this sucker in 2. And I'm going to cut it in 2. I don't have to stress over getting it even within a half an inch of the same. It doesn't matter. But I want each piece to be as long as possible, so I'm going to try and get it as halfsies as I can. And then I'll cut it to length to be the right height that I need. So that piece of oak I had, I measured halfway from there to there in the middle. I took a piece of plywood a lot like this, just some scrap that I had, and I stapled it up under here, because what you can't see is this is not a solid top. This is a top sitting here, and it has a frame. So the frame only goes in a couple of inches and a couple inches at the back. So there's kind of a cavity in there. And what I need to do, because I want my divider to extend back onto the frame if possible, maybe not, and then forward onto the frame here, then I needed to match that same profile underneath. So I just cut a piece of plywood, stuffed it in there in the center. So then I cut these. I snuck up on them on the table saw so I wouldn't get them too short. This one's kind of nasty. Veneer's coming off it. That shouldn't cause me a problem, because my bottom drawer slide should be on the bottom here, and then the top one should be up here. So this goes in there just barely snug, which you can imagine that any wooden cabinet between here and here, this top is likely to have sagged a little. To have a little bit of support there is good. And of course, I can slide it back here to show you how short it is. It's about 2 inches maybe short. And I don't think I'm going to be able to make up that whole thing. However, I have a trick up my sleeve. Something I've done with shelving units and whatnot before. I'll use this. This is one of the old shelves from this system. And again, it's a press board. It's sawdust and glue is really what it is, with a very thin layer of something that looks like a plywood surface. You know, it kind of makes for a nice aesthetic, but you know, it's plywood and glue. But on the front, they have a nice, what looks to me like maple edging on the front. Isn't that nice? And it's rather thick too. It's not just a thin veneer. That adds a lot of strength to this, you know, sub-premium lumber. I'm trying to be kind here. So I'd like to do the same kind of thing on these plywood dividers. And I could go 2 inches. I could edge glue a 2-inch piece to that. I don't think there's any point. And you know, when you're edge gluing something, especially on press board, it soaks up glue a lot, so you're not going to get as much structural rigidity there. Your chance of failure is kind of a little bit higher. So I don't know what I'll put on there. It depends on what I find here. I'm going to look in my stash here of hardwood. I might find some maple. I might find some oak. Just a couple of strips that are, you know, probably an inch or less thick or wide. Should be 3/4 of an inch thick. And then I'll cut those nice and straight on the table saw, and I'll glue those to the edge. You saw me do edging like that on the bed build. I edged the whole thing with quarter sawn white oak. So it's exactly the same process, just it's going to be just on a loose piece instead of on a cabinet that's already been built. So this one's wider. This one's long enough, and it's wider. So I'll kind of freshen that up. I'll cut that down the middle. And again, if it's not more than 2 inches wide at the end, it's not going to be too wide, because I'm not going to be able to go all the way to the back anyway. So I think that piece of oak is my answer. Again, the width of this, the final width of each piece, I'm just going to slice that. Isn't that critical. I just want to cut that in two. So I want to sort of get something that's sort of kind of in the middle. And so I'll just hold this against my fence here. I've got a measuring tape on my fence here, and that's, you know, it's just under 3 inches. So if I kind of rip that 1.25 inches, then I'll have two pieces. They may get smaller too, because I need to make them really nice and smooth and clean on the edge to do an edge glue. Here's some checking, some cracking. Over time it's dried out, but I don't need the entire length. I need just under 24 inches. So, you know, that's here. So I'll get a little bit of checking, a little bit of a knot there, not a big deal. Okay, so let's get this at 1 3/8. I hold this up there and eyeball that. It looks to me like that side is slightly larger than that side. And I'm going to use my feather board from my bin that's on my new table saw drawer slide thing. I should take it apart. It's a little bit of a to-do to take it down to one feather board. So I'll just put up with it being this wide. If you're working a table saw, get one of these. There's a couple different kinds I've seen. This is a Miles Craft. Miles Craft product. They make some pretty good products. So you can find that at your local online or whatever. Miles Craft, always the better idea, it says. Not so sure that's true, but my safety glasses, dust collector. I wish you could smell that. That aroma is just magical, in my opinion. That white oak. Boy, this is going to be fancy. Look at the figure in that white oak. I don't know if you can see it. So anyway, and I know this is proud of 3/4. So when I get that on there, then I can trim that. Either I've got a little router jig, I can do that, or however. As a visual, this is what I'm planning right here. Just gonna glue that on there. I'll glue it on as is, and then I can trim that for length when I'm done. There's different ways to kind of do this. You can flush it by feel on one side, and then I can trim it on the other side. You can sort of see how much proud that is. That's about a 7/8 wide. So one of the issues here, if this were a thin piece, I'm going to say 3/4 of an inch or thinner, then you can just spread glue and drive a brad nail through it. This is a bit wide for a nail, so I don't think I'm going to have any fasteners at all. I will put it on there and just clamp it. You can even use tape. I used tape on the bed because the bed was so wide I couldn't clamp across it like that. Since my table saw is normally my assembly table, here's a little shop trick. You're working on a panel, you want to sit up like this. Get your clamp it there, and now you got a base to hold your panel up. And that's exactly what's going to happen right there. I might even do a rub joint. I explained a rub joint last year when I was doing covers. So why don't we try a rub joint? It looks like that's jointed really nice. There's no gaps in there at all. The only difficulty, which I can deal with later, is that this piece of lumber is slightly bananaed this way. It's got a slight concave here. I mean, really slight, a 32nd. I can't see it. I can feel it with my fingers. So that can be trimmed later with the router jig, and then sanded and whatnot. So let's try a rub joint on this, see how that comes together. If you remember on the bed build, I used small nails. I drove a small nail in there and cut the head off and let it protrude, so that when I would put the wood on, it would grab, so it would slide around. When you glue a surface, it gets very slippery, very slick. And I'm not clamping this, so that's not going to be really so much of an issue. Another thing I've never done, but guys talk about on the forums, what you can do is use salt. You put a little bit of salt in your glue, and that gives it some grit. And then I guess the salt dissolves in the glue, I suppose, and it just gives enough grit that it's not as slippery. Okay, let's get some of this on there. Titebond Original. This is not a severe weather application. This plywood is not even weather rated plywood, so a non-water waterproof, non-water resistant glue of a sufficiently good quality, which Titebond is an excellent quality glue, is really what we need here. You can use Titebond 3, you can use waterproof glue if you want. It's going to work great. It's just a lot more money, that's all. Okay. A rub joint. I can feel it just pulls right down in there. It's very, it's very stuck. It's difficult to move even. And I'll just align it best I can, like that. You don't really need to get too wild for aligning because you're going to trim. I'm going to use my router and trim bit to take care of that. There's different ways you can do that. Here are two options for how to trim that. This is it's not the most amazing bit for this. It's kind of a cheap bit, and it's just sort of flat. So he's spinning that on the wood. It's just going to kind of make a flat. So then you take your router and you get this bit set just right, like that, and it just takes that right off. You can run right down that. And the other way is this. This is called a flush trim bit. Okay, this bearing is the same diameter as these cutters. So your bearing can run along a surface, and anything that's protruding above that then gets trimmed. This might not work because the piece that I'm trying to trim is deeper than the bit. Yeah, you know what, that might work. I'll try it because I can trim this part. It should work because the shaft is smaller. And then I can just raise it up. Once I get this flush, I can raise it up and trim that. So anyway, those are a couple of options I can use. You could probably do that on table saw, stand the panel up. You might want to build yourself a tall fence. Use that feather board in its extended format. Keep that panel straight against the fence. That's probably the least accurate way to do that. So in this case, it wouldn't matter much. This is shop furniture, but you know, practicing those skills is always kind of fun to see how nice you can make it. And if it's not, you know, perfect, if it's not up to that level that you really were shooting for, that's okay. It's a shop drawer. It doesn't matter. So then next time you can up your game a little bit. So that's just kind of what I go for, just practicing different skills. So I'll set this aside and I'll get the other panel in this clamp. That piece is really nice. Really, really nice. The aroma of that oak. Oh, just love it. Oh, my glue's getting a little viscous on me. Glue does get old, and this glue might be kind of old, but I've had really good success with the Titebond, even if it's a little bit older. I've actually frozen it, and it's turned out okay. I think they say you can freeze it once or something like that. The Titebond 3 tends to separate, so often I'll store the bottle of Titebond 3 upside down. I don't think it matters which way I go with this. So I'll just choose arbitrarily to do it this way. Rub that joint. Rub joint, you know, your pieces have to be bang on exactly flat and straight, square, no space. So if this is a I'm trying to flush it to this side best I can. If it's proud, that's okay. I can deal with that. I can trim it. If it's shy, done. Like, it's going to be shy forever. So that is my priority. Even this end, you know, if it's proud here at the end of the day, I want to get that flush, because that really frees me up when I go to trim this. I can run this side along the table saw fence and then trim the other end really easily. So yeah, so I'll get that. I'll get this side flushed best I can. Again, the center is slightly proud. That might be the plywood, I don't know. But the two are not exactly straight relative to each other. So that's it. That's that's an edge glue. So set this aside as well. I want to set the panels up like this to dry, because if you lay that panel flat, and you're probably a beekeeper, and you'll know what slump is. Slump is what honey does over a day or two when you're not watching, and that stuff will always move. And try it sometime. Put something with honey on it in your freezer, and lay it there. Maybe lay it at an angle or something. You come back in a period of time, and it will have flowed even though it's frozen. So if I were to lay these flat over time, before the glue is set, that piece will slump, and it'll either go out of alignment or it'll come off of there altogether. So here, set up like this, it you know, gravity is working for the joint, and it should come out real nice tomorrow. I also need to make the drawers for this project. However, I don't think I want to start that quite yet, because I want to get my dividers installed and just make very sure that I've got all of my dimensions just right. And I think these doors are going to be integral to my drawer construction. I'm actually thinking that these will be the bottoms of the bottom trays, just like I put in the table saw cabinet here, because they're, you know, they're press board, but they're still pretty strong. They're still pretty rigid, and they're not even going to be that wide. They're only going to be probably about 18 inches wide. And how wide is that, you say? And these are, well, that's 18 and a half. What did I say? 18 and, so it's 18 and 3/16. Yeah, these will end up being 17 and a half. I'll take about an inch off of them likely. So they'll be 21 inches deep though. And they're 22 and a half below this handle thing that they made. So below this handle, they're 22 and a half. So they'll be 21, I think, 21 and a half overall. That's actually a real wood, and it looks like red oak handle piece. See, they edge glue. This is good tape. They edge glued that top piece of lumber to that door exactly the same way I did. I've got a little bit of a reveal. Here's a trick. See how you've got a reveal there? This is a trick you can use if you try to make that flush like this. See, I can feel it's not quite flush. Some more flush there, but I'm trying to make mine flush, and that's a lot more difficult than leaving a reveal, because that reveal can be probably a 32nd to a 16th off. You'll never see it. So that's the trick you can use to make it look like you got it accurate, but you know, not so much. I can start by taking these hinges off, just some Phillips screws. Take the hinges off the cabinet. I have to take the shelf supports out of the cabinet. This handle piece at the end, see where it was the weakest at that small part, it broke off. So that's one of the problems with these cabinets. Remember what I said about Ziploc bags? Gotta have some in your shop. I don't know about these little plugs. Maybe I can pull those out. Now this cabinet ended up having two styles of hinges for some reason. I don't know why that would be, but it did. And the one style I couldn't separate, so the entire hinge is still stuck to the cabinet itself. These hinges were retrofitted, is why they're different. And I know that because those are Robertson screws. This cabinet has been repaired a couple times. So that's the two-part hinge for that side. Goes together like that, and that screw holds it together. Finish taking these out and then put them together. Oop. The weirdest thing, there's no screws in that shelf support. We're stapled in. Oh no, there's a staple there, staple there, staple there. Like three little staples holding that in. I'll probably bend it getting it out. A few years ago, I bought a whole whack of stuff from an estate sale, and this little tack hammer came with it, and it sure is a nice little hammer. When you want a hammer, but you don't want a big hammer. And I don't know if I can show you here. I might get in the way. I was looking at this thinking, I wonder if my little tack hammer would get in there, pull that track off of there. Sure enough, my little tack hammer is exactly the tool for the job. And there's just 4 little staples holding that in for that great big wide shelf. And I guess some engineer said that's enough. I would not put a big shelf on just staples like that. That's just me. I'm kind of running out of things I can do on this project. I need to wait for those dividers to dry, trim them up, and get them installed in the centers. I want to do that first because I want to make sure that I get my centers centered, my dividers centered. So then when I build my drawers, I've got that all worked out nice. Those drawer glides, they have a tolerance of 1/16 of an inch, I think, on each, not on each side, overall. So 32nd on each side. And so that's not much. You need to be within a 1/16 of the width of your drawer compared to the width of your opening. And I'm not that good with drawers yet. So I think I'm going to leave it at that for today.